Hi everyone, this is Rachel here with the Shades of Orange. Today I'm here to do what I hope will be a pretty fun video, and that is my 2018 book gift giving guide. I personally love getting books and I love giving books. However, I don't actually have a lot of readers in my personal life, especially those that I would normally be buying gifts for anyway. So I thought this video would be a really fun outlet for me to talk about some of the books I wish I could give as gifts. And I know it's not going to be exhaustive, but these are just ideas that I came up with, books that I wish I was giving out. And I would love to hear your comments down below if you have other suggestions, and we can just kind of keep the list making going. Let's get started. First, I want to recommend a couple books for the foodies in your life. And what I mean is those people that just love to cook and love to eat. And I think we all know someone like that. So the first book I thought of was actually a graphic memoir, and that is Relish by Knisley. And this is all about her growing up in a foodie family. Her parents were both very interested in culinary cooking growing up, and she just recounts her experiences. And it's very different than my own background, but I just got so immersed in her story. I like the fact that it's very balanced. So while she has these incredible food experiences, she also admits to the fact that she went to Paris and then ate McDonald's there because that's what she was craving. So it's very high-end in some ways, but in other ways, it's just a celebration of food. The entire graphic memoir is done in color with beautiful artwork all done by herself. And I just think it's a very gifty little book to give out. So I definitely recommend that one to any foodies out there. And the other foodie book I want to recommend is Hungry Monkey, which is written by Matthew Amster-Burton. And this particularly I would recommend to parents or soon-to-be parents, particularly those with younger children, because the entire book is about a father who was a food critic in Seattle and became a stay-at-home dad. And he recounts his experiences trying to give his daughter a love of food and make her just embrace all the different food that is out there. And he talks about the challenges of dealing with a picky eater. And he's very honest that while he tried really hard to expose her to all these different foods, that there are times that she's incredibly picky. And it just goes through the ups and downs of various cooking, and it has lots of recipes in it. I think it's very relatable to anyone who is both a foodie and also a parent. So I just think, again, it would be a really nice gifty one to give to someone in the throes of that, because it gives them the message of giving someone ideas about how to feed a child, but it also is very forgiving and saying that it's okay if you try all the rules and guidelines and suggestions that are out there and your kid is still somewhat picky, because that's what toddlers do, is they're really picky and say no to everything. So I definitely would recommend that one as well. Next, I want to recommend a few books that would be perfect for geeky people, particularly friends or family that play Dungeons and Dragons. And I thought of a couple books that I would love to gift. One being Of Dice and Men by David Ewalt. And this is a nonfiction account going through the history of Dungeons and Dragons, which a lot of people may not necessarily be aware of even if they play the game. And it's really told through a personal narrative, so it's a little bit memoir, in which he recounts his own experiences with his D&D group, the challenges of fighting with the dungeon master and difficult players, and what happens when, you know, your teammate turns on you and decides to kill the whole group. So I think it's written with a lot of humor. It's very interesting. It's quite short, and I would definitely gift it to anyone who is getting into Dungeons and Dragons or is a hardcore player for years. I think both will really enjoy this one. And if you want to go the fiction route, I would also recommend a fantasy book that will ring true to anyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons. And that is Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Ames. And this is about a group of mercenary adventurers that in their day were known as this incredible band of warriors, and now they're getting a little bit old. They've retired. However, they have to get together one more time to do one more adventure, and it's kind of a joke on a lot of the classic fantasy tropes, particularly surrounding the idea of a group of guys going on adventures. And the whole book is clearly written by someone who loves Dungeons and Dragons, because it's just has so many nods and winks to that kind of feeling of getting together with your group of buddies. It is a more male-centric story, but I still really enjoyed it. And I do know that more guys do tend to play Dungeons & Dragons. It's changing, but there definitely has been a male prevalence in the activity. And I just think it's really funny. It's easy to get through, even if they're not a big fiction reader. It's very accessible in terms of fantasy, and it's just a lot of fun. So I definitely recommend that one if they're looking for a fiction story to check out. Next, I want to recommend a book that is perfect for someone who loves contemporaries along the lines of Liane Moriarty's books, which are a little bit suspenseful too, and perhaps also love the series Black Mirror on Netflix, which is a very dark speculative fiction story. And I personally want to recommend One by John Mars, which is exactly that. And it basically reads like a cute contemporary version of a Black Mirror episode. And in this world, it's set in a near future, near the modern day, but someone has figured out something in our DNA that allows them to predict who should be your soulmate. And what follows is several different plot lines that are somewhat interconnected that show the different effects of a situation that would probably occur if this was actually true. And so you get to see couples that are already together and decide to take the test just to make sure that they're actually soulmates, which possibly has some bad consequences, and other people finding their soulmates online and just what happens afterwards. It was very juicy and compelling. It's a book that you will just fly through. So if you know someone who usually reads contemporaries but is okay with something a little more twisted and a little bit more speculative along the lines of Black Mirror, I definitely recommend that one. It's a really unique pick, and I just haven't really read anything quite like it. So it was a really great one to read, and I would definitely recommend it to the right audience. And I also want to recommend a few books that are perfect for those sciencey people in your life that are more drawn towards nonfiction. Maybe it's someone who just enjoys learning new things in their spare time. And I would first recommend The Future of Humanity by Michio Kaku. And this is a very speculative nonfiction book that looks at the future of the space program and how humanity might expand beyond Earth. It's a very optimistic story that really looks at what technology and processes would need to be in place in order for us to do that. So it looks in the short term, discussing what Elon Musk and other entrepreneurs are trying to do to get us to Mars and so forth, but really looking beyond that, looking into technology like artificial intelligence. And I just found it very fascinating. I think that it will appeal most to people who, like myself, are interested in science, but don't necessarily have a science background. If instead you know someone who is quite interested in that kind of information, but already does a lot of research and reading on the subject already, this book might be a little too surface level, but instead I would recommend Elon Musk by Ashlee Vance. And this is an authorized biography that explores and studies the entire life of Elon Musk from his childhood up to what was the present day. I think this book was written around 2011 or 2005, somewhere in there. But I just found this book to be fascinating and really gives you a better understanding of who he is. And you get to see the brilliant side of him, but also the more difficult sides of him. You realize that he would be an incredibly crazy person to work for. He is incredibly demanding. He can be eccentric at times. And I just thought it was really fascinating to get this deep dive into his life. And because it's the only authorized biography, it's the one I personally recommend because I trust the information in it to be more accurate. But I would personally recommend it to anyone who is a fan of his work or is just fascinated in the work that he is doing, even if you're not a fanboy per se. I think he's just a very interesting person to watch, and I would definitely recommend that book to the right audience. And on a more serious note, if you know someone who is perhaps struggling in their personal life, especially this time of year, I would recommend giving them a nonfiction memoir called Option B by Sheryl Strand. Of course, she is the author of Lean In, but after she wrote that, her husband, who was quite young, I think he was in his 40s, went on a vacation with her, ended up having a heart attack and died suddenly, very unexpectedly. And this book is her discussing how she attempted to move on past that. But not only that, it's partially a self-help book because it really explores the idea of resilience. And it's not a book about, oh, just getting over a bad event and being happy and optimistic, but a very honest account of how people survive terrible tragedy in their lives. So with some caution, you have to know your audience for sure, but I would cautiously recommend this one to someone who has lost a relative, perhaps someone struggling with infertility, or just something else in their life where they are just looking for a source of strength. And I am not someone who normally gets really into these self-helpy kind of books. I was honestly very cautious and reluctant to pick it up, but I ended up trying it out on audio and I just got so much out of it. It was exactly what I needed when I read it earlier this year. And it's just wonderful to have a book like this available. You have to, again, know your friend or know your family member whether or not that gift would be well received. But if you do think they'd be open to a book like this, it's very well done. It's not preachy and I highly recommend it. Now to switch to a lighter note, I also want to recommend a couple of graphic novels for fans of the TV show either Bob's Burgers or Rick and Morty. And I just love these humorous, inappropriate cartoons for adults. And I want to let you know that both of those TV shows actually have authorized graphic novels that were written by the same TV producers that write the show. And maybe it's a little bit of a cheat, but I read and enjoyed the first volume of both of those collections and would definitely recommend them as really fun gifts to people who are obsessed with the shows, especially people who are between seasons and just wanting more content, more jokes, more humor. Either one is great depending on which TV show they're obsessed with. I'm obsessed with both, so either one would be a great gift for me. But I just think that's a kind of fun gift that you could give to either an adult or a teenager that is just, into those TV shows. Finally, if you are oh so lucky as to have a horror fan in your life, I would highly recommend checking out Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix and giving that to them. It would make a great coffee table book. The entire book is a nonfiction account of several decades of horror fiction. It goes through the different tropes that rose in popularity at different times based off of different events that were happening in the world. It's full of humor, and Grady Hendrix finds all of these obscure paperbacks that are ridiculous with silly premises and also talks about a lot of the more iconic books. It's fascinating. You will definitely learn something new. I learned a lot. And it's the kind of book that even when you're done reading it, you just kind of want to comb through and look at the pictures, which is why I think it's great for a coffee table. And I would just give it to anyone in your life who is like me, obsessed with horror. I think it's a perfect book to gift. It's large and beautiful with full color illustrations of those covers, and I definitely recommend it. If you can find an excuse to give it out, just do it. So those are my recommendations for some book gifts that would be perfect this time of year. And I would love to know down below if you have other recommendations. I realize my list was not exhaustive, so if you have a recommendation for one of the categories I mentioned, or a kind of reader that I didn't even discuss, go ahead and put your recommendation down below. Also, if you're struggling to find a gift for a reader in your own life, maybe put a comment down below describing what kind of books they like, and myself and other readers can chime in and try to give you some personalized recommendations for that particular person. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you got some good ideas, and I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.